All right. Let's see, what are we going to do today? For this one, we're going to be making fire and smoke effects from Maya using nFluid, and then rendering that out to a sub-UV image or texture, and then bringing it into Unreal Engine 4 and making our own smoke. We're going to be using Python to do it, so there's not going to be a lot of manual creating. Let's see. So the first one I'm going to do is smoke. Looks like this. Obviously not going to win any awards or anything, but it's one way to show you how you can make your own sub-UV images or sub-UV textures. We're also going to be using Photoshop. Create these. So this is just a little test level. I just enclosed the third-person example. And then I just replaced the character with the cube because it's a little bit in the way when trying to look at the. And it's volumetric as well, so it looks like the object or the character is actually moving through the smoke, not the camera, depending on the angle and all that. But okay, we're going to be creating all of these from scratch again. So I'm going to delete these guys that I've got here. I'll just put a placeholder here. All right. So I'm going to start in Maya. And then what you want to do is I'm going to be using Python script. Now this script is actually available online. You can get it, link in the description for the video. I have a couple of scripts here. I'm going to be using this fire script here. You just copying all the text in here and just pasting it in here. You have to do it as a Python script. And this is fire. Yeah, so this is the smoke. So for this one, I based it off of the demo I got from Maya. I'll also link to that, but it is in the script. They have a cool demo. This is from Maya 2013, but it still works and it's still relevant to Maya 2018. All the nFluid stuff is pretty much still the same. So all I did was I followed the demo, and then as they were creating, as it's creating those or whatever, I would just script it out in Python and just test it as I'm going. So then you can always just play with these values. It's also doing the incandescence and the temperature and the colors and all that, which is quite useful. So all you do is you can obviously put this script in your shelf and a button for you or whatever. So this is a brand new scene that I just created. You can see there's nothing in here. I'm just going to run the script. And then I'm going to close it. I don't need it. And now you'll see it would have created a layer. And in that layer, I'm using a torus that I filled a little bit. This was all now created by the script. And then if you look at hit the emitter, the fluid container, it's going to be auto size. I'm going to drop this down to 40. It'll also set the timeline to 312. But there are no keys generated. If I just start playing it now, it's going to create a mixture of fire and smoke. So what I'm going to do is I want to hide this. going to switch the boundary to none and hide the mesh again. I want to see. And you can see all the various properties in the script that it set and changes. Some of the important ones are, of course, these values here. Now it will automatically create these values here, these colors, but I don't like them. I want to do. Could just change them in the script. I could change the script to do this, but then again, you know, so can you. It's not that hard. So that change that I did now is here. It's logged. You could see it. It literally called this, and you'll see these incandescences created here. So you could just either not create so many or use these values here and replace them. It's pretty straightforward, you know. Sets the color as a 3, red, green, and blue. It's the position in the where this is 0. The first is 0. That is 1. And I think that's over the life of the particle, maybe, or the. So this would be close to life, and this would probably be close to death, kind of thing, of the particle, or the fluid sim for that particular set. And then it sets the interpolation mode to. Sorry, that's linear. It also does the same for the opacity. Using exactly the same thing. So you set the float value. For example, if you click somewhere here, you can see clearly Maya tells you, oh, did this. That's how you could do it. So you could add a new key by simply, if you specified a new, just undo that. If you specified, because currently there's only 2 keys here specified, 0 and 1. So if you add a new key, it'll be key number 3. Here's a key. I did set a key. So there's 3 keys here, 0, 1, and 2. So if you click somewhere else, then it showed you how to create a new key by setting the value, which is the opacity value, for example, because this is a float value, not a color. The position in between, you know, where 0 is life, 1 is death, and then the interpolation mode. So if you can set these any way you want, but these numbers here typically have to match where you are position-wise. So you can't set position 1 higher than position. Sorry, you can't set up this opacity 1 position higher than 2's position, because how it would appear chronologically according to the life of the particle. That's the only thing to keep in mind. That's where this gets a bit tricky. But and to test these is quite cool. You can just select this and literally, you know, run it. You can hit control enter and it will run it, and it just reran the script there. Similarly, if I do this on the incandescence, see it went and recreated the. So it's pretty cool. I'm going to undo that because that's fun. So I say you can just go through and play around with it. You can see all the values that are set here. I've added a lot of comments. You can read through those. It is just really following this. I guess this is a tutorial where they're creating a slag. You ask me what a slag is. I don't know. This thing slags around. Turn up something. Okay, so that's enough about this. Let's move on. For the next step, what I want now is I'm going to be creating this. This is an atlas or a sub-UV texture. I'll explain in a little bit. First, I want to position my camera. I want to make sure I'm using, not using Arnold, I'm using my hardware. And I'm going to just set it to PNG. I'm not a, I'm not going to use, 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 I'm not going to I'm after speed here, and I'm going to set this to 256 by 256. I'm looking for a really small sub-UV texture that's going to be tiling. I just want 6 by 6, so 36 sub-UV images. So 256 times 6. The image is going to be that size, and then I'll scale it to be a power of 2 closest, or not 2. Rather scale down than up. Okay. So next thing is let's get to the what. So in your Maya images folder, my stuff typically renders out TMP. For Maya hardware, Arnold sometimes does its own thing. Yeah, let's see. If I just hit render here, I'm going to try and position this a little bit better. I'm going for a top-down view, render view, because that's works better for me. You can play around in this script with using different shapes. You don't have to use a torus, and it's all broken down here. There, it's setting the geo emitter as a torus. You can change this to a cube or a sphere. You know, spheres might work really well for smoke. And it's then obviously you can see here it's setting all the values here, setting it to a surface emitter. You could change it to a volume emitter, setting all of the values you would normally set manually here. And it's also a nice way to show you how to create an emitter using a container and emitter using Python, because that's not normally, there is no Python script for it. The mel script is there, but it basically does this in the background. And to figure this stuff out it's not that difficult, but that's not what this video is. So now you have your emitter. I've set my resolution to 45. It's not going to be really high, but I have a slight problem. I don't want this emitter to be emitting the whole time. I just need a little burst. So I'm going to just use some values that I know work for what I want. I'm going to start with a rate of 600, jump to frame 100, keep the rate at 600. Now this is under the emitter, the spawn rate. And then here at about 110, I'm just going to set it to 0. So at 150, I should still have some right about there. It's when it ends, around about 100. It's okay for now. So let me just stop here and take a shot. So what I don't want is, I do not want any clipping of my image. And I don't want to sit your scaling the cropping that. So also don't want this. That's much work. But I mean by too much, demonstrate here. You can set your render settings up really high and get a really high quality smoke, and then you can, you know, spend a day or whatever it's going to take to render it out to 36 by 36 or 6 by 6. Is 36 good frames that you need, and you want a nice little animation that you're going to be using in the engine. So the higher quality you can get, the better. But right now I'm not going to do that because this is going to be a live. Then you can use this, what I'm showing you here, and make it your own, do your own thing. It's just an idea, one way to do it. I know there are many different ways. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go up to my render settings and just make sure that I'm going to render out. And I'm going to set it to give me 150 frames. I'm going to make sure my cache or temp folder is clear, and then I'm just going to render sequence. And then I want to just make sure that nothing touches the sides. I need 36 good frames. I'm probably not going to be using the beginning frames, and probably not the last frames. And there already I can see it touching. Problem. matching the borders of the image. But let's see if I got something out of that I can use. Otherwise, I'll just do it. I'm already here. I think it's these aren't bad, but these are not enough. Only about half. Could use these. Right. Not gonna look the greatest. Fine for what I want to show. Because I'm just going to be doing the same thing again, so point in that. You can play around with that yourself. Right, so let's say I'm happy with these. If you just play these, you could sort of see what's happening. It's creating a more like a billowing effect. Now that donut there in the middle is going to be a problem. I normally would have liked a little bit further. I'm going to show up in this, but it's okay. I'm going to use it anyway. Head on over to Photoshop, and I'm going to use automate this old one, contact sheet 2. Really easy. The default values are not going to work, so you need to put in the correct width and height of the document that you want. I'm using 6x6, and you have to zero this out. When it's in pixel mode, it doesn't work. Make sure it's 0 and jump back to. Then I'm just going to import those. And again. Maybe just select those guys. 6x6 across. Let it do its thing. You can have a sub UV, usable sub UV. Right, now you could play around with the levels and things like that and get it how you want it. I'm going to create an alpha from the inverted RGB. But I'm also actually going to keep this inverted RGB. I'm going to try. I prefer the white smoke than playing with this. The next thing I need to do is I want to resize this to 1024. So that's okay, and you want to try and fill up as much area as you can. And let's save this. I'm going to call this smoke sub UV text. And then I want to save this out as the TGA. Here you choose 32 bits per pixel. And then I'm going to open it back. Make sure alpha. Right, now we can jump on over to Unreal Engine. So let's start by bringing in the texture. By 1024, it should be. And there we go. So it says for channel true. It did create 11 MIPS for. It's important that it has MIPing enabled. That's what it needs to be do. And it looks, yeah, it's difficult to see here. Next thing I'm doing is I'm going to create material. I'm basing all of this basically on the same principle that Unreal Engine uses for their smoke. I'm just calling my material smoke sub-UV underscore. Now it needs to be default lit translucent, and then you need to make sure that you're using volumetric. That's the only change in the material, really. And then we need to bring that in as a particle sub-UV. And I'm just going to select it here. You don't need to specify the columns or anything like that. Are they doing a couple of weird things when they're doing a couple of weird things with this. I'm gonna do basically the same thing. You could always just copy theirs, copy their part smoke sub UV, right? But I like to figure out. So you need the particle color from the particle system. You're also going to need some sort of texture that's going to tile really nicely. So I'm going to use, I've played around with this a little bit, and I'm going to use a cloud texture. This is a 512 by 512 cloud texture. This is non-tiling though. I think I could be wrong. No idea. And then I'm going to make sure to give it a texture coordinate with the same U tiling and V tiling that my sub UVs are. So we've taken 36 6 by 250 images, cramped them into one texture, and then scaled them down a little bit. So there's 6 across and 6 down, right? So 36. We're doing here. Now we're just going to be adding something. So first thing we want to do is add then we multiply the particle color in, and then that goes to the base color. Now we need to do the opacity. And for opacity, we just multiply these two together. Take the particle opacity with the alpha opacity WV, and then we have to clamp it. You don't really have to clamp it. Sometimes it looks cool. You can even go negative opacity and things like that. Really cool effect. You can play with that just. And then they're sending it through a depth fade, which I've learned is really useful. And that goes in. So depth fade is for when hide unsightly seams that take place when translucent objects take ones. So when your particle planes are intersecting with geometry, it does that. So it makes that edge where much more, much less visible. Or they really say, yeah. All right. There is one thing I like when I do, which I didn't. And I mean that I want to control the strength of this blending texture here, texture, whatever I want to call it. So I'm just going to do another multiply here with the scalar. And I'm just going to call this blend strength, noise strength. I'm not sure what the right word really is. then we'll be adding that. And we'll set this to a default of just half. You'll see the effects of that. I'm going to leave that open. Our smoke isn't going to look as cool as theirs. I do like to have. Next step is I'm going to just create a material instance. Here will be just create. Just going to leave the default name that uses. Now we can start with the particles. I'm going to call this FX smoke. I'm going to drop it in the level here quickly. Just go out. So I'm going to be comparing a little bit between what I've gotten, they've done. In theirs, that's typically how I work. You're going to see, unless I'm doing something on my own, I kind of like the effect that they. So under required, there's no settings here. We really need to change the emitter itself. I'm going to just use my smoke instance here. So smoke sub-UV material instance. I'm going to do a quick shader recompilation. Right, and there you can see our cool texture is doing its little thing. You don't actually need any of that. Like some vertical. Right, we need to specify our sub-UV information. I'm leaving it square, so it's placing the camera square. I'm going to be doing velocity scaling or anything like that. Under the sub-UV section, we're using a linear blend. Then we have 6x6. No, it's just spewing out the default first one. So let's quickly fix that. Putting spawn sub-UV here. On 0 I'm using 1, and on 1 I'm using 35. So I do want the particles to change. Already you can see something's happening. You know how these sub-UV particles work. All it's really doing is just playing this little animation here from left, right, top to bottom. And slow it down and speed it up. But obviously then it won't reach the end, so you can make this like 12. You could make this animation play slower. When it reaches 12, it'll just stay there and a loop back. But you could make it. Right, so it's just playing out the little smoke animation. When it gets to the end of life, it's playing the last one. I'm moving it back a little bit sooner. And then bring down the spawn to about 3 or 5. You can see the smoke is, it looks like it's changing. That's the effect that we slow this down. A second here. See what it's doing. It's creating this nice poofy, puffy. So that's from the sub-UVs that we now. We need to try and match sort of billowing. See, lifetime. I'm gonna kick it up to between 4 and 6 seconds. The initial size is going to have a little room to work. the initial size. I don't care about y and z because it's a square, so we'll ignore those anyway. So the initial size will set between I guess 50 and 70 and 100. A little bit big, you're right. Leave it for now. I might just pop back over. What values did they use? Use something similar for because it looks really cool. Initial velocity. I don't need to move around a lot. Let's give it a little bit in x, like 30 and 10. I'm not going to give it any in y, and then z, which is up and down. I'm just going to give it a little bit, like between 20 and 10, something like that. Now we're seeing something happening. Color over life, pretty important. So I'm gonna go for a grayish color on birth and just a darker grayish color on. You could give it a little bit of brown because we're trying to hit something like that. Really brown, but you get the idea. Subimage index with now we need a couple of other. It didn't do location. This 10 on location, so they don't also. I'm not setting anything else here. Right, let's do. At birth, I want it to be about half the size, and I'm actually only going to start changing the size from about there, not at birth. So it'll stay half the size of its initial size, whatever it was, until 10% into its life, and just before 0 point, yes, about 3/4 of the way, I wanted to reach 1 1/3 of its initial size to give it a little bit of a billowing effect. Seeing something happen, it's starting to look interesting. The popping is really annoying. The popping is, and that's because we need another key. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add another key. Make sure that at 0.7, about 3/4 in its life, it's invisible. About 0.1, I want it to be completely visible. We might change that to 3. And then I want it to be completely invisible when it lives. So now it doesn't have that super poppy. They've got a lot more keys in here for their, because they've got a really nice alpha transition that they do. I'm not doing that. I'm lazy. So we start out invisible, 10% into life, we're completely visible, and about 3/4 of our life we become invisible. Now, because these values are matching, or sometimes you see a little bit of popping there, and I think that is the particles starting to kill a particle, and not all of these values have taken effect. That's what it looks like. Because normally you'll see them fading out really nicely like this. Could be this. I could want this. Right. And then I'm not crazy about the orientation, so we wanna fix that quickly. Just dropping it in by default is fine, but I'm gonna go with -1. Already it's starting to look cool. I also, well, better. Also want a little bit of rotation rate. Definitely not that. So what I'm looking for is just a little bit of a, right, just a little bit of a rotation, random rotation. It doesn't look. And then I think we still need to do, let's do Excel. Didn't like that value. For me, that's much. And I do like just a little bit. That's starting to look like something. This was a steam lift, we'd probably also be adding some drag. So it's starting to look like smoke at least. Look like two. What else? Let's compare. They do. Here's only 10. This is a little. I think I have. I think they've. So that's how I usually compare. Get an effect that I want to either figure out how they did it so I can do it myself, or you know, just learn. Now the problem with this, and I'll quickly. Here's are gonna look better. So I swap over to my render. This is not the case earlier. So theirs is on the left. Excuse me. Mine's on the right. Now I'm actually pretty impressed. Earlier mine was going nuclear, and by nuclear I mean extremely bad. It's going white because of all the overdraw. But keeping in mind I am spawning more than they are. And I mean the smoke took a few seconds to do. The smoke here that they've got their fluid, I think they did it the same way using the fluid nFluid, but their smoke sim looks really cool, really nice, and it's billowing automatically. I took the nice billowing animation. I just took a top-down snap of a little bit of a billow. It's gonna look different. There's fades out on the borders, really nicely. But like I said, you can put in a lot more effort into these sub-UV smoke images, and they'll start looking really nice. So what I was trying to do with the that scalar value in the materials, I go to the materials and let's put it here, and we just play around with this value. You can see what you can do and create really cool textures inside of your smoke. Obviously, there's so many different ways to do this. Giving you an example of one that I like. And then you can always go in and just crank it up. So currently, I think they're spawning the same as we are, 3. You could go to 7. And then it's going to go nuclear, I promise you. It's going to go, that white is really bad, but you know, you could, with your LODs, if you put in some LOD, let's put in some regen the lowest here, and go higher. So now it's on LOD 1. We'll bring over the spawn rate, and I'll set it to half, less than half. Sub image index, so you can flatten that if you really wanted to. And then let's add another LOD. Now it's going to set this to 500 and 1000. We go higher, so now it's LOD 2. Bring this over from higher and set this to 1. We have to be in game for this. So now obviously it should be spawning at full rate. There should be calming down here. Oh yeah, you can already see it. And then from about here, low. You can see it kicked up a little bit. And then here it's going to be. So you know, with your LOD controls, you could do really cool. If this is going to be off in the distance somewhere, you probably also want to bring down to get rid of that puffy your lowest LOD or your highest LOD. The other way around. Anyway, there is LOD 0. And bring this down. Then on your lower LOD, it won't look so weird. Well, it shouldn't. It's going to look a little bit puffy. But there shouldn't be such visible emitter in behind. So that's cool. So some stuff to think about. And the more you spawn, the weirder it's going to be. So if you start spawning like 100 of these, it's going to look weird. I think that's it. That's cool. Stop here for this video. Where am I? So I think for next time, we're going to be doing the fire. It's going to be pretty much the same, but we're going to be running the sim in Maya first. And then we're going to be using a lot of the same techniques here. We're going to be looking at how Unreal did their fire in Cascade, and then copying what they did, and you know, make it my own and figure it out. So I'm not just grabbing their fire and using it, because I think that's a little lame. You gotta do your own thing, using the way that the clever people show you. Not me. That's it. Thanks for watching, guys. And that's it for this one. Where's that? I never remember this. Why am I so bad? There it is. Okay, cheers.